Hello, 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 and welcome back to It's Bigger Than Biotech. And I'm your host, Hriday, a director at Kite Pharma and a student at the University of Southern California.
And I'm Vishnu, a software engineer and machine learning and neuroscience researcher aspiring to be a neurotech entrepreneur, also here at SC.
It's an honor to welcome our guest today, Mr. Gilles De Prevoisin, to It's Bigger Than Biotech. Mr. Gilles is a seasoned professional with a unique journey that spans consulting and the pharmaceutical industry. Starting his career at Deallus, he built a strong foundation in competitive intelligence, becoming a subject matter expert and managing teams, clients, and projects. Transitioning to Kite Pharma, he deepened his expertise, mastering disease areas and uncovering insights that drive deep strategy, making him an incredible source of knowledge combined with his passion. Anyone interested in navigating the ever evolving biotech and pharmaceutical sectors can always learn from an individual like you. So, thank you so much for being on It's Bigger Than Biotech with us today, Mr. Gills.
Yeah, it's my pleasure. Thank you for having me. It was really nice meeting you back then. Feels like a long time ago, but it's a pleasure to help out wherever I can.
Thank you so much. So let's get started. I first wanted to ask you about your role at Deallus and Kite Pharma.
Sure, yeah. So I think what I ended up doing at Deallus was, I mean, it's the easiest way to say I was a consultant, right? And I think that can mean a lot of different things to a lot of different people. At a smaller firm like Deallus, we'll call it a boutique firm, my Deallus focused mostly on like competitive intelligence, which is the type of like analysis, and you have a little bit of like strategy, maybe some components of management consulting. It's a good mixed bag. So when I first came in, obviously having not a whole lot of direct consulting experience, I started out as essentially an analyst. So my job there was to, learn different disease areas, do a lot of different types of due diligence projects, a lot of Googling, a lot of going to meetings to learn. And then I quickly started learning how to share more of like strategic advisement to like my clients, worked my way up into being more of like a people manager, would manage different projects at the same time. At one point, took an interest in developing some like technology platforms. So we worked on like developing like knowledge management tools to kind of help us when we were actually at a conference to like organize ourselves and help our clients get organized. So I did a little bit of a good mix there. Covered a wide array of disease areas, which I think is one of the nice things about working at a smaller company is you get a lot of room to wiggle around. So because of that, I learned a lot of different types of topics, anything from, I mean, early pipeline developments to research for, business development through pre-launch, launch, what you do after launch, all the way even to like generic assessments and evaluations of like biosimilars. So I've really worked across the entire product lifecycle while I was a consultant, which is extremely helpful. And then once I kind of made that natural transition into industry, I kept my competitive intelligence hat on. I just hopped the wall, walked onto the industry side, and have been doing that since. Again, Kite is a smaller company. We have, owned by Gilead, which is a much larger company, but still in the grand scheme of things, like right size. And we've grown a lot, but because it's a smaller company, again, get the opportunity to wear a lot of different types of hats, work on a lot of different projects, work with a lot of key stakeholders. So I think it's been a big learning opportunity. My whole career has always just been learning so far, which has been really nice. But that's what I currently do at Kite right now as well.
Yeah, I really appreciate that answer. Learning is so constant over a career. But one thing that really caught my attention was the term competitive intelligence in and of itself. It sounds like spy work pretty much. Like you're almost like going into the competitive pharma company and like looking into what they're doing. So like overall, what specifically is competitive intelligence and how did you find a field like this even existed in the first place?
Yeah, those are two really good questions. Let me answer it from this way. So when I was interested in consulting, it wasn't that I knew exactly what competitive intelligence was and sought it out. In reality, I just thought I wanted to go into consulting.
Mhm.
And I would wager that's an overwhelming majority of most people, right? They just think consulting because in reality, when you're a student, no one else really tells you about the types of consulting that there are. When I was looking at different types of companies, the one that I ended up landing at was one that focused on competitive intelligence. Once I learned a little more about it that way, I got much more interested and was invested in trying to get hired at that firm. But I also found a couple other types of consulting agencies that were not my immediate interests. Some that looked at, for example, like health insurance strategies. There was ones that did a lot of like research in med tech and like med devices, which is extremely interesting in and of itself. But for me, I was much more drawn to like biotech and like drug development. So I landed at Deallus, which is great. And then I think what competitive intelligence is, it's also evolved a lot, right? I mean, you kind of have your management consulting, which has been around for a very long time. But competitive intelligence really has only been around for like a fraction of that. And it really only took off within the last maybe 20 years before people started really dedicating, headcount responsibilities to that as a job description. So competitive intelligence is it's a bunch of different things, but at its core, it's looking outwards, right? Like for my company, for Kite, I'm Kite's eyes out. So I look at the disease areas. I try to see how they're currently evolving. I look to see how they might evolve in the future. I look to see how other companies in the field are, placing bets or starting new clinical trials. What about those clinical trials? Are they global? Are they only developing them in Europe or international markets? Are they novel combinations? Like when did they start? What kind of physicians? So like you're really trying to like look and understand at everything. So it's called competitive intelligence, and it kind of sounds like spy work. Maybe at one point it was a little more like that, right? But back in the day when I used to go to conferences, the big medical conferences, like huge medical meetings where they would present the latest and greatest data, it was discouraged to take pictures of data.
Okay.
And so we would kind of like try to take a picture without getting noticed. And sometimes they'd kick you out, sometimes they wouldn't. Now it's widely accepted that people are going to come and take pictures, and it's not too much of a big deal. But back in the day, it was a little more like, you're trying to remain discreet on while you were learning about disease areas.
Right. Okay, very, very interesting clarification. Definitely, like, it's not so much spy work anymore, but it's definitely a very cool field to work in. And honestly, like, I wanted to explore the transition from being a student to going into consulting and then going into competitive intelligence in the pharmaceutical industry. Like, what were some of the barriers you faced? Like, what was that journey like?
Yeah, so I think for me, and I'll put a STEM background to it, right? Most people in STEM, I don't think when they come in their freshman year are aspiring to be consultants.
Right.
Maybe someone who's in an MBA or an accounting like has more of an idea of what consulting might be. But I studied chemistry, like specifically organic chemistry. The idea of consulting did not cross my mind until I was well into my junior, even senior year. So for me, it was kind of like, okay, well, I don't really see the need to pursue a PhD in chemistry for the type of work that I think I want to be doing. I could always go back and do a PhD if I really wanted to after a year or so. So I thought it was a good trial for me to look for something different. The difficult part for me was consulting has a lot of like business acumen. There's silly buzzwords like what's the so what, like there's books written about it, and it sounds cliche because it is, but it's also extremely true. Like as a chemist, I wasn't really trained in pulling together a narrative in a succinct way that would resonate with a diverse group of stakeholders. I was used to speaking to chemists, a little less so someone who's working on like marketing for drug development with a field representative lead in the room and someone else who's doing medical affairs. Like you have to really tailor your types of conversations in a way that will make sense to a broader group of people. So learning how to speak confidently about topics was a little bit of a challenge and a learning curve. I think there's a lot of resources out there for, how to become a consultant. There's a bunch of books. There are free resources online. They're not that expensive. And so I studied all of them. And if there's any advice I could give is any amount of time you spend preparing or a consulting case interview is time well spent. It's not like studying for the GRE where you're like, why do I need to learn how to do these timetables or something, word problems? Like, no. Case study prep is incredibly helpful for your career in the long run as well, because it will help you be able to answer questions, explore questions with an interviewer. I'm sure it's helped me to where I am today. So I think the hardest part for me was pivoting into case study prep and then learning how to speak to consultants during an interview.
Right. Yeah. And I feel like that sort of skill set might be helpful even when you're not in consulting, just knowing how to answer those questions in a structured way. But you mentioned a few books that you would use to prepare for these consulting case studies. And do you want to shout any of them out, the ones that you feel were very helpful?
Yeah, I'm trying to think off the top of my head because it's been a number of years. One of them is coming to mind. I think it's called Case Interview Secrets. That one's like, you should be able to find that one. And what was the other one? Probably Case in Point. I might be making that up. Anything about case interviews or consulting interview prep, like
Right.
it should be pretty easy to find online. If you're interested in any specific consulting company, I mean, they know where they're recruiting, right? They know they're recruiting students for a good majority of their workforce. Sometimes they have questions online. Like you can go onto their website and they will have white papers or documents, and they're structured in a way of a case study, so you can like read those. When I was working at my consulting firm, like I had a white paper published on a topic that was literally the case interview question that I would ask people about. So if they did some extra homework and like read the white papers, they might have had an advantage. So Googling until you get bored of it is definitely a good way to learn about a company, and you might learn something about your case interviews that way.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. You touched upon case interviews for consulting and talked about your role as well. I do want to go more into the recruitment process because that is what lots of our viewers are here for. Can you tell us more about your personal recruitment process, both for consulting and into the pharma industry at Kite right now?
Yeah, it's a very fair question. So I think my personal like experience, right? I realized I wanted to go into consulting as I was sending out applications for PhD programs. So at the same time, I realized I don't think I want to go and pursue a PhD. For me personally, I think I want to go try consulting for a year and see what that's like. The problem was I realized this basically after all of the on-campus recruitment cycles had completed. So I was quite literally late to the game. And on two fronts. Like I was late because I had nothing but my GEs and my ridiculous number of organic chemistry classes behind my back, and not a whole lot else. Like I took a couple fun classes here and there, but that didn't really help me a whole lot. Ironically, I took one class that was completely irrelevant. It was sailing, and one of the consulting companies I interviewed with, the CEO was like a big sailing advocate, and all we talked about during the interview was sailing, and he like loved me. So like you never know what's going to be helpful, but the reality was I didn't have a lot of business classes or, intro to consulting classes. I had nothing. So when I realized quickly, okay, I need to put something under my belt. And there are classes at USC that, touch upon that. I found one it was an economics course, and it was Introduction to Economic Litigation Consulting. It's like oddly specific. The problem was that it was a 400 level course. So I didn't have any of the prereqs. Like this was, for juniors and seniors. I went to the professor, just went to his office hours, and I basically begged on my hands and knees to waive all of the prereqs. And he said it's not possible because he didn't want to fail me. And if you're going to get into consulting, you gotta have a little bit of a chip on your shoulder. And I said, if you fail me, like you can give me a straight F, but I will ace your class if you let me in. He thought it was funny enough and let me take his class. So I took the consulting class, performed well enough to where he actually hired me afterwards as an independent contractor. And that was my first foray into consulting. I didn't even know what it was. And it was really analytics. I was building web scrapers, doing like data stuff, and it was fine. And it was a really fun experience. But it wasn't really like consulting. All it had was that dumb word consulting on my resume. And I was able to put that there. And it helped me like a little bit. Once I got into the off-cycle recruitment cycle at USC, there's like I think there's like a fall one and like a spring one. The fall and spring ones were like a little different. Those companies for me that's where I got like, I think one found interest. I did get a job offer from one of them, but again, it wasn't what I really wanted, so I didn't pursue it. And then afterwards, I have found that because the major companies, I think big three or like big four companies, like, your McKinsey's, your BCG's, whatnot, they recruit, they go through a recruitment process. If you are not on that recruitment process, you will not be evaluated. And that's just the straight up truth, right? So I found that I needed to find other ways, other consulting companies, and there are so many boutique consulting companies that do not recruit. They're just not on that type of cycle. They don't have the resources to send someone to the universities. And that was my experience. I basically started Googling like crazy, finding other consulting companies out there, ones that specialized in biotech, which is what I really wanted to do. And
Yeah.
through that, I was able to find my first consulting company, like my real biotech consulting company, which was Deallus.
That is pretty cool. Yeah, that is a very unique experience. And I think lots of people start into consulting in their freshman or sophomore years. But I guess from your perspective, people also start from their senior years. I want to understand again from the previous question what the difference was for recruiting from healthcare consulting, which you touched upon, versus competitive intelligence. How do you think your courses, the things you learned, pivoted you into competitive intelligence?
Yeah, that's fair. So I think while I was a student at USC, I did a lot of research, like obviously like wet lab research. Like I worked in an organic chemistry lab synthesizing catalysts. And as part of that, I like learned about why you make catalysts. And it's because sometimes they're used in drug development. So I learned that like a little bit about the drug development. I did a fellowship with Pfizer as an undergrad that I thoroughly enjoyed from the science perspective. And I thought, okay, this is pretty cool. This drug development idea seems really interesting.
Mhm.
What kind of consulting companies out there deal with drug development? I didn't really know what I was looking for, but I knew I didn't want to do like a marketing group, or personally, I didn't want to go out and do like, market research. I wanted to do like drug development consulting. And in a weird way, competitive intelligence gets at that because you're working with companies to help them either monitor disease areas or figure out where they want to like make their next investments with drug development.
Okay, that is really cool. And sticking with the recruitment process, you touched upon lots of, I guess, advice for people going into consulting. Do you have any advice for students who want to go into the pharma industry, like you are at Kite Pharma?
Yeah, so I think depending on where, you all are and like your journey, right? Like sometimes pharma companies will have programs that they set up through USC. So for example, like with the pharmacy school, usually if you're a pharmacist, they have like formal working contracts where you're going and you're working in the pharma company for a while. That's one way to do it. If you're in a master's program, some master's programs, for example, like just right next to USC, there's like KGI, like the Keck Graduate Institute.
Mhm.
They do a lot of programs with local pharma companies like Amgen and Kite even and whatnot. That's also a good segue to get into consulting as well. There's through like that. But if you're an undergrad student and you're wanting to go into pharma, in full transparency, not all of them will readily hire someone coming straight out of undergrad. And it doesn't mean that those jobs don't exist, but remember, like at Kite, for example, Kite is a smaller company. So we have a very flat structure. The ability for a company with a flat structure operating at the level that Kite is to hire someone fresh out of undergrad is difficult. It is not impossible, but it is a little more difficult. Maybe like some of the more larger established companies will have some kind of funnel or process to do so. But in reality, like it's usually a little more difficult. The other thing is, corporate and like pharma industry is very tall, and it takes a while to kind of climb up that ladder. If you come in at the bottom, it's going to take you a very long time to climb
Yeah.
up the ladder.
Yeah.
Whereas if you're spending some time at consulting, it actually kind of helps serve as a springboard, which will bring you into the pharma company at a more appropriate level. So 2 to 3 years of consulting, think of it as like little consulting university, will get you into a much better, healthier standing within the industry. So that my recommendation would be like, rather than spend 8 years at the bottom of a pharma company, go spend 4 years at a consulting company, and it'll buy you a lot of time on the back end.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, there's obviously the question after you graduate, do you want to pursue a master's, a PhD? But now there's another route too. You could always go into a consulting company and get your experience there and then transition, which is a very valid point in and of itself. I wanted to take a step back into your time at university, and you've achieved quite a lot. You worked at the Locker Hydrocarbon Research Institute while at USC, and you were a Pfizer Research Fellow as well. So, could you explain more about how you found these opportunities and how they helped you? And what are your thoughts on the importance of these kind of opportunities for your career later on?
Yeah, that's a good question. While I was an undergrad, so the work at Loker was essentially working as like as a lab tech. I was working as an organic chemist, doing all sorts of things, trying to not burn my eyebrows off. Doing undergraduate research is, I think, very important as a scientist to kind of prove your scientific competencies. I probably for the rest of my life will not ever use a mass spectrometer again. But I know how they work and I know why they're there. And maybe if I pursued a career in like drug manufacturing, some of those skills might be used. Right? So it's not like I'm like learning transferable skills by working in the lab. What I did learn while I was at the lab was how to get papers published as well. So I basically like published a whole paper. And doing so, I was doing a lot of research, had to work through like the submission process to the publication board. They fed me back feedback, was answering it, got the publication out, turned it into a poster, went to a conference, presented it at the conference as a poster. So to me, it gave me a lot of visibility and a lot of experience into like what medical conferences are or scientific meetings are, which is where I got really excited about what they were. And that was also one of the things about competitive intelligence, just to go back to that, is you go to conferences. I love these conferences. They're so much fun. There's a lot of information. Obviously the component of travel. So I enjoyed those. So to me, I was like, okay, like that showed me that the traveling and the conferences are really cool. Once I was there for a while, at the time I was planning to pursue a PhD. So I was looking at fellowships to apply for. And Pfizer has a location down in La Jolla near Scripps where they do a lot of just basically like raw chemistry. So amongst other things, they don't have like any like real like headquarter things out there. My PI and I decided I should apply. I won the fellowship, which was great. And it was a really cool experience, again, just working with other types of scientists. And I think while I was applying to consulting companies, specifically consulting companies that hire people with STEM backgrounds, having those experiences lended credibility to my ability to like, speak about pharma and drug development. And it's kind of a way to prove that you are able to do the work that's required.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, conferences are a great tool to like just learn what's going on in the industry in and of itself. And like you doing this while still in university is a really big achievement. And there's actually like so many resources out there, right? Like university is just a pot of resources that you could use to propel your career forward. So did you have any other resources you took advantage of besides research? To kind of propel your career, boost it up in some way?
Yeah, that's a good question. So the way I got the research job at Loker was by speaking to some of the professors, which is not the most comfortable thing to do because sometimes you get locked into a conversation that you don't want to be there for, but they're talking to you about the research and you're stuck. And then sometimes you meet really cool people that you're like, wow, they're researching. Like there's this one professor who was researching clear, flexible solar panels with the idea of like applying them to windows. And I thought, that sounds revolutionary. I would love to do that. And he's like, but I don't have any space in my lab. So you just have to learn to knock on doors, get comfortable with speaking to these people. And I landed at my lab, and through that lab, speaking to my PI about who was also one of my organic chemistry professors, like I told him like what I liked about it, like does he have any experience working in pharma? And he did. He worked in pharma for a while. He worked on a couple like drug development companies making small molecules, and that through him he helped me find that fellowship. So you definitely just have to like build, I would say, more like genuine relationships. You have to work on that rapport, right? Like, I mean, you just have to see which professors you click with, make sure you're attending the class, like speaking to them afterwards, going to office hours. And if they see that you are an invested student, then they are more likely to want to invest in you and helping you out.
Right, definitely. I mean, like sometimes with these questions, most people answer, okay, reach out to other alumni, right? Like the USC offers so, like the alumni network is so strong. But something people fail to realize, like you said, that professors are so smart here and they have so many resources that could help you out. And you have classes with them, but you just never, like most students don't even talk to their professors after class. They just leave. Most people don't even attend their classes. So like, yes, please go to classes, guys. Yeah, but like in and of itself, right? Like if you could go back in time and you go back to university again, what would you have done differently?
That one's tough. There's a few, I guess there's a few variables that I might have considered. Now, would I trade anything to be where I am today? Like make anything different? No. Like where I am today at Kite, I am extremely privileged to be in the position that I am. I love my job, my coworkers, what we do. We're making a difference in cancer and oncology. It is extremely rewarding. If I took a different path out of university, I don't think I would have landed where I am today. So I don't know. But if I were to go back, and I would at least liked to have known the other paths, right? Probably would have explored more business courses or consulting clubs or whatnot earlier on in my studies. Probably would have paid more attention to recruitment cycles and prepared myself. It would have been nice to have known if I
Yeah.
could have gotten into a big company, but I don't know if I was ever able to do that or not. So I think that would have been a little better, like organizing myself a little sooner. There are, I have like two opinions on like master's degrees. One, like just for example, right now, if I wanted to go pursue an MBA,
Mhm.
MBAs are great. I know a lot of people with MBAs. It's a great to pivot, but I don't really need to pivot in my career right now. And the idea of taking 2 years off, paying for school, losing my salary, like nets out to like $1 million decision. It does not make sense for me to do that right now. However, when I was younger, there are programs that do, like joint bachelor with an accelerated master's program like a year afterwards. That might have been cool simply to have the master's degree somewhere. Like it's not going to hurt. But if someone like I paid my way through college, like taking on more debt at the time was not an option for me. So yeah, it kind of depends. Each situation is unique. At the time, I did think that I wanted to go and do like a master's in biotech or something I thought it would help me get a job. And it might have, and I've seen it help a lot of other people get jobs, but at some point in time, you're just gonna have to really fight the fight that is recruitment and job applications with or without an advanced degree. And so I don't know if it truly helps differentiate people or not.
Right, yeah. I mean, like if you were to go back in time, would you have taken more sailing classes? Would you say like would you want to be a sailor?
I took it's funny, yes, I did take as much of those as I could because I loved it. And some of the people in the class actually fell in love with it and they ended up buying boats. Two people in the class loved it so much they bought a boat and got married together. So it was one of the best things at USC was to take that class. It was really cool. And now actually one of the gentlemen that I took the class with runs the class, which is funny. So it's weirdly addicting. But yeah, no, I think other classes that I would have taken, again, like probably more businessy ones. I somehow got through my entire chemistry degree without a single biology class, and yet I'm currently working in biotech trying to understand like complex mechanisms of resistance. So I probably should have taken a biology class, but that's, hindsight. So
Yeah. Oh, that's great.
That's really cool. I think I will register for a sailing class next
yeah, you
semester.
should do it.
Yeah. Yeah. I want to kind of pivot more towards industry and what you think about the future. So, what do you think about the future of your current role at Kite? What do you think is going to be the next breakthrough?
That's a good. Well, okay, so let me clarify the question. So, what do I think about my industry, or what do I
Um,
think about like
about your role in competitive intelligence.
Sure, yeah. So this will be a kind of a fun story. So a couple years ago, actually I don't remember exactly. It was early 2000s. There was a technology that came out called CAR T therapy, right? CAR T therapy is a type of cell therapy, which is a bit of a derivative from gene therapy. So essentially what we do is We manufacture a virus. Now imagine, like, actually, while I was at USC, I took a physical chemistry course, and one of the assignments was to calculate the entropy it would take to fit a RNA strand into a virus. And I thought, why are we doing this? Like, this is so weird. Like, and now I actually see there's like a legitimate practical application to that, which is manufacturing viruses is part of gene therapy. So you take a manufactured virus, you give it to a patient's B cell, your white blood cells, essentially, right? Your T cells. And the virus helps that T cell express something called a CAR, C-A-R. Now, the CAR basically is just a pair of glasses that your T cell has now, and it helps your body be able to find cancer within your system more clearly. And it allows your T cell to do its job. So your T cells are always killing like malignant or benign extra cells. But at some point, the cancer gets complicated. It starts going under the radar. So this therapy helps you find things wrong with your body. One of the first patients to be treated with CAR T therapy, she is super famous now and a public figure, so it's okay. Her name's Emily Whitehead. Her parents started the Whitehead Foundation. She was a young patient with pediatric leukemia. Okay, pediatric leukemia, not that any cancer is fun to have, but that one's particularly not fun to have. The parents were like, what do I do with my daughter? They were at, I think, Pennsylvania. And the doctor said, hey, this is investigational new therapy called CAR T. Do you want to do it? There's no large body of evidence. We don't know if it's going to work. We don't know if it's going to kill your patient or cure your daughter. No idea. What do you think? And they thought, let's try it out. So they tried this investigational therapy. She started to develop some like adverse events. You know, one of the good things when they're killing cells is that it releases things called cytokines. But one of the problems is if you have too many of them, it creates what's called like a cytokine storm, and then you have like fever and neurotox, and it's not good. And the doctor thought, well, where else? Like neurotox is pretty bad. Like how else can I block this? Oh, I know. Like I have experience, secondhand with the rheumatologist, and I know that blocking this one type of interleukin will lower this problem. Let me just try that. He just made it up on the whim. And they tried it, and it brought them the cytokine storm, helped her get back to speed. And Emily, I think, is currently going to NYU to study film. Okay, she has a whole life ahead of her. They literally cured a terminal cancer in a patient, which is remarkable. That same technology today is being used across a number of patients. I think most recently reached a big milestone. We treated over 25,000 patients around the world. It's amazing. That's 25,000 patients that have been given the opportunity to, go and like experience new life. That same crazy scientist idea, right? Thinking, what if I do something different? This group of scientists out of Germany thought, you know what else is bad about your B cells? Autoimmune diseases. It's when your immune system is just going rampant and like doing things it's not supposed to be doing. What if we restarted your immune system? What if we gave CAR T therapy to these patients? A group of German doctors started giving CAR T therapy completely off label to these patients with like lupus. Lo and behold, some of them we believe are cured. This is literally like hot off the press. It's only like a year or so old. And so now every company is running full speed to try to figure out how this works, what this means for these types of patients. What if you give it to a young female patient with lupus or different types of autoimmune disease, or one that might have neurological involvement? Can you cure these patients? You're telling me that we have the opportunity to significantly impact these young patients? That's phenomenal. My job in competitive intelligence, at least right now, or a job similar to that, is to keep on top of all of this information. What does the data look like? How is it evolving? How are they managing patients? How are they selecting patients? Where are they running these clinical trials? Who are the doctors they're running it with? What are the companies behind it? Where are they getting their sources? Are they doing venture capital funding? So it's really just trying to understand everything that everyone else is doing, organizing that in a way that's digestible to a different stakeholder group within my company, and then helping them and advising them into making the right next steps for hopefully to help more patients. So that's kind of where my specific field is going, and my specific role is attending these types of meetings and learning a lot about this stuff.
Yeah. I mean, firstly, very inspiring story on CAR T therapy. Like, of course, like cancer is a massive problem worldwide, and like seeing people be cured is very, very inspiring. Okay, so I wanted to move on to the rapid fire segment of our
Yeah.
podcast, and this will be our last one. So, my first question in that would be, what topic in the healthcare, pharmaceutical, or biotech industry do you love the most?
I feel like I just kind of spoke about that. I do think cell therapy is something that I'm extremely passionate about. It's harvesting the power of a patient's own T cells, your own white blood cells, to be better and do their job better. I think it's remarkable. It's extremely complicated, and everybody's learning as we're going. And the types of advancements they're making on it, like they do. I just explained what a car is, but now they have ones that express two different types of arms. We have ones that will, help your body from your T cell produce an antibody. We have ones that will secrete a certain type of, like antibody or interleukin to kind of like help keep it suppressed. We have on switches, off switches, kill switches, all sorts of types of really interesting technology going into these cells, which is remarkable. And hopefully one day we'll be able to continue to improve upon it and to like reach more patients faster. But I think to me, it's definitely an interesting field to work out. The other problem is that it's incredibly expensive, right? Like when Kite was first doing clinical trials, one patient cost like around like $1 million. Imagine running a company where every time you're trying to see if something works, it's costing you $1 million. That's ridiculous. Now we have that cost brought down way much more affordable, right? And we're making advancements. So it's really cool. So it's advancing. Hopefully we're reaching more patients, moving in the right direction. But I think that's what gets me the most excited.
Okay. Well, I hate to go back and forth here. I just remembered my question that I forgot a few seconds ago. Was that you mentioned that your job was pretty much compiling all this data that you have about other companies and presenting it in a digestible way to other stakeholders. Do you think AI is a potential threat to that in the future, or do you think it helps supplement it in a way?
That's a great question. I would say it's for the time being a supplement. I do see a use for like AI tools to help me. I currently use some to help me, but I don't see it really understanding everything. So for example, I'll put unless you yourself are building an AI tool for a specific problem,
Mhm.
I don't know. I mean, it's evolving so fast. I'll give you an example. Like one company, like a big top pharma company started a new clinical trial, right? It got to phase 3. Usually when a clinical trial is in phase 3, that means it's hopefully registrational, meaning they can submit the data to regulatory agencies for commercial approval. The study only had clinical trial sites in some parts of Asia, as well as some parts of like India and Saudi Arabia, like the middle of the world and in Asia. No clinical trial sites in Europe, no clinical trial sites in the US, no clinical trial sites in Japan. In order for you to get approval in Japan, you have to have Japanese sites. In order for you to get approval in the US, now, most of the time, you need a substantial US population. Same thing for Europe. You cannot run a clinical trial out of Italy and expect France and Germany to reimburse your drug. So this study had all of the signs of it being a global program. It had a name, like it had a fancy name. It had, a good primary and secondary outcomes. Like it looked like a clinical study for everything except the locations. And then slowly but surely, I saw as I was tracking this clinical trial site, because it looked suspicious, they added more sites, a couple in Italy, a couple in Spain, eventually France and Germany, the UK, some in the US, more in the US. And once we saw that evolve, I realized now we understand that my suspicion that I had 2 years ago has come to reality. Whether or not an AI company can like develop a program to monitor that type of detail, I'm sure it's possible, but I don't think it's there right now. So I could use it to help me. I could have it like I have a long list of clinical trials I need to track. If
Yeah.
AI is helping me track them and giving me like the little changes,
Mhm.
then I could see that being time saving for sure. But like completely replace, I don't know. It might, but not for the immediate future.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, AI is a threat to a lot of desk roles. So I mean, yeah, like it's definitely a ever evolving field. But going back to the rapid fire questions, what is okay, so I want to ask about the fun facts regarding your role. What do you love about your role, firstly?
Yeah, so I currently within a competitive intelligence role or like a internal kind of like strategic advisory position. There's other ones, right?
Mhm.
Well, firstly, any job can be strategic, right? It does not like you can be like an administrative assistant to the CEO of a company, and you know like that at this time of the year they're going to need meetings with these people, so you help them out, you reach out to them in advance, you help prepare them, they have a more beneficial meeting. Anyone can be strategic, right? It does not necessarily have to come from like a strategic advisory firm. So what I love about my job is the ability to be strategic partners with a wide array of stakeholders within Kite and my company. I work with everyone from the manufacturing to tech ops to our IT teams, our field teams, our medical teams, people who do clinical development, corporate strategy, literally work with everybody. And I thoroughly enjoy that. It's very rewarding to me to like meet with other people. I'm very much a people person, so I like that a lot. One of the other things, like the best perks about the job, perhaps, is within competitive intelligence, I do go traveling to conferences. That's probably the most fun perk, like full stop. While I was a consultant and now, like I've gone to probably over like 100 and change like conferences, and they're in fun places. Right, like I've gone to ones that were in Argentina. I go to Europe probably 2 to 3 times a year, all throughout the US. And it's just they're in generally like in like really big cities, if you could imagine, like Paris, London, Munich, Milan, and sometimes they're in small cities because the meeting is small. So like early next year, I'm going to Strasbourg, France. So it's to me, it's like the best perk, and I meet people like a lot of my global and international colleagues. So it's definitely a fun part of the job.
Definitely. Okay, so in the next question is what do you dislike about your role? But before I ask that, since it's rapid fire, it's supposed to be between one sentence and one
Okay.
not sentence. Like, again, like what do you dislike about your role in one word to one sentence?
Well, part of what I liked about it was working with a lot of people. That's also a negative. Sometimes I'll get a random request from someone saying, the CEO asked me this, give me that. And I have no context. I don't know where the meeting came from. I don't know what the desired output of it. So sometimes it's a little frustrating and there's a lot of swirl and fire drills you have to do. So those are definitely not fun. And they usually come when you don't want them to come, like on a Friday afternoon. So dealing with that's not fun.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, yeah, like it's both an advantage and a disadvantage. I see that. In a way, okay, so what is an interesting network story that taught you a lot?
That's a good question. Pharma is a small world. Any industry is small,
Mhm.
right? And I've worked with people that I love and that I would consider close friends now. And I've worked with people that I am not particularly interested in staying in touch with, to put it lightly. I've run into both types of people throughout my life. You'll see them at a conference, you'll see them at a different company. So never burn a bridge is something that I learned. I mean, you're going to run into people over and over again throughout your career. And I've seen people's entire careers get built off of good relationships. So that's networking is not to be underestimated.
Wow. Yeah, definitely very insightful right there. Okay, so what would your favorite source of pharmaceutical biotech industry related information be?
Yeah, so the good thing about pharma and biotech is that there's a lot of investor activity behind it, which means there's a lot of secondary sources out there. There's ones like Seeking Alpha, Fierce Pharma, Endpoints. There's a whole slew of them out there that comment on usually anything that might move the needle, a good performance, a bad performance, an acquisition, a new clinical trial. So if you can subscribe to those and maybe pick like oncology or certain disease areas, like it'll definitely help. You'll start seeing trends and things. So all of those are free, and I would highly encourage anyone who's interested in it to subscribe to those types of sources.
Okay, definitely. I'll be looking into those as well. And my final question to you for the podcast would be, what is a wise quote that has always stuck with you over the years?
This one's going to sound pretty lame, but you just have to get good at something. It doesn't matter what it is, but you have to be good at something. It could be storytelling, it could be you're extremely equipped at assessing the US payer system. It could be you're really good at drug pricing, you're really good at forecasting. Being a generalist is fun in practice, but when you're trying to apply for a job, it's not the easiest. So if you're good at something, that would probably be worth more than an advanced degree. That's the advice I was given when I was trying to weigh into whether or not I pursued a master's or not. And this answer was just get really good at what you're doing. And that's what I did. And I think it's served me well.
Yeah. Wow.
All right. Thank you for tuning in to the episode of It's Bigger Than Biotech. A huge thank you to Mr. Gilles for sharing his invaluable insights and experiences with us. If you found this episode helpful, don't forget to subscribe and share it with your friends or colleagues exploring their careers in the biotech and pharmaceutical industries. Stay curious, stay informed, and remember, biotech, it's bigger than biotech. Until next time, this is Hriday and Vishnu signing off. Thank you.